Okay, so we have freshman year first. Remember? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? All right. Remember when girls cross country made it to state?
Remember when the storm knocked out the power and we had the day off from classes?
Remember when no makeup Wednesdays?
Remember when we had no snow days?
Remember when we had spring fling?
Remember when dress code said no sweatpants?
Remember when we had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?
Remember when Night Nation was started?
Remember when Max, Torger, and Bobby went on the roof during the running of the freshmen?
Remember Rube Goldberg in physical science?
Remember when in Algebra 2, TJ asked, you know that thing after that thing, is that in the thingy? And Mr. Hagedorn translated it.
What? What? Remember when TJ got hot sauce in his eyes at Spring Fling?
Remember when we had to pay $1 to wear sweatpants?
Remember when Mrs. Apple tripped during volleyball practice and candy flew everywhere?
Okay, so now we have sophomore year. Remember when 5th hour girls Fayed convinced Mr. Ross that we had confession circles on a daily basis?
Remember the heat days?
Remember making creatures in biology?
Remember when Torger chipped Jamie's tooth in PE with a lacrosse stick?
Remember when we had individual lunch tickets on a green strip?
Remember when the lockdown drill that lasted 2 class periods?
Remember when the health classes talked about the reproductive systems on Grandparents' Day?
Remember when Becca's head hit a pole in PE and left a huge bump?
Remember Austin Weeman's speech on straws?
Remember dissecting frogs?
Remember when Jake Motsky put his sweatshirt in Angie's locker in case she got cold?
Remember the parting of the Red Sea?
Remember speeches?
Remember PB's couch?
Remember when Matt Ross left then came back?
Remember Mr. Bender's It's Friday?
Remember when Mrs. Hanson got married?
Remember Planet Earth and geography?
And remember donkey basketball?
One more time, remember donkey basketball.
Want me to say it again? Okay. Remember when donkey basketball happened?
All right.
Yay.
Okay, you want that? Okay.
Ladies first.
All right, thank you. All right, remember when girls basketball won regionals and reached sectional finals? Woo!
Remember whole wheat pizza?
Do you remember when Ray did that dance in American Lit so we could earn extra points? Because I remember that really well.
Remember when we won homecoming for football?
Woo! Do you remember hot days?
Do you remember cold days?
Do you remember it raining last year on prom?
Do you remember Senorita Ron?
Do you remember last year when Shib's snake got stolen and never returned?
Do you remember when Nicole's cat ate Mr. Ross's muffins?
Do you remember Torger Henkel falling asleep in every single class?
Do you remember Trivia Crack?
Do you remember our class trip? This is senior year, by the way. We're already in senior year. There's not that many.
Do you remember TJ's 39 points?
Do you remember our Hunger Game themes for this year's homecoming?
Do you remember Mr. Hines' relationship advice for Jamie Horseman?
Do you remember Ray and Allison becoming our homecoming king and queen this year?
Do you remember when wrestling won their first ever conference title?
But do you remember football winning one game? More than one game. Excuse me, more than one game. Sorry.
Do you remember the cake eating contest?
Does anybody remember when Mr. Ross got married? Aww.
Do you remember when Mrs. Lusky beat cancer?
Can you remember some of our class's driving skills? Rough.
Do you remember our ESPN-themed basketball game?
Do you remember Allison Dovenberg's volleyball speech?
Do you remember when tennis won their 10th consecutive conference title?
Yeah. Read these names one at a time.
All right.
Each person.
Do you remember Brittany Becker? No.
Do you remember Hannah Felch?
Yeah. Katie Hansen?
Christine Mandan?
Peyton Nibbling. Yeah. That was a good one.
Abby Roscovius?
Do you remember Jesse Schaefer?
Do you remember Rachel Selke?
Do you remember Austin Sommerfeld? That's a good one.
Do you remember Morgan Williams?
And do you remember Zach Wierski, Dragon, aka? Oh, Jeremy Nikolai. How is that not on the list? Jeremy Nikolai, everybody, yes.
That concludes part 2 of our Remember Wins. Thank you. Next up, we're going to ask Rachel and Caleb to come up and sing Little Wonders.
Ready? Okay. Here we go.
Heart is
and gentlemen, with our final address, welcome up Sean Walsh.
Classmates, teachers, friends, on behalf of the senior class, I'd like to thank the juniors for all their hard work making and planning this evening for us, so we can have one last memorable event together. Before we end our program tonight, I want to talk to you guys about this year's theme, These Small Hours. Our lives are made up of a collection of these small hours. I want you guys to think back. Think back about the hours you spent prepping for your sports, or plays, or concerts. Think about the hours you spent doing your homework, or studying for that test that you needed to ace. These hours spent with your friends, and of course, all those hours spent sitting in class. Now, some of us don't have very many of those hours left. Some of us do. But I wanted you to think about how you're planning to use these next small hours. What are you going to do? I want you all to think ahead to these small hours you have left. How are you going to use them? As Solomon said, meaningless. All is meaningless. Keep in mind that we need to be ready to take the next big step in our lives. A lot of us are going to college. Some of us are joining the workforce. Use these small hours to also grow in your faith, because that isn't meaningless. Remember who you are. You are a child of the light. Let your light shine with your last small hours. And even if this is one of the last times we see each other, I can't wait to see you all on the other side. Let's enjoy these final small hours together tonight. Thank you, Sean.